Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Mary's Little House. So happy to have you. Everybody's asleep except me. I want to talk to you about obedience. Obedience brings us such peace. Obedience makes us authentic, and we stand on the solid ground of truth, the ground of God Himself. The saints, the spiritual writers all say that our holiness depends on our doing the will of the Father. When Jesus came to save us, He came to not do His own will, but the will of the Father. And when He made the ultimate sacrifice, the night before He died, He had to struggle in that agony in the garden, seeing all the suffering He was about to undergo. And He sweated blood. But ultimately, His will submitted to the will of the Father. Father, not my will, but thy will be done. When St. Paul said of Jesus that He became one of us, that He became a slave, that He became obedient even to death on the cross, He shows us the importance of obedience, that we were saved by the obedience of Jesus, saved from sin, which is disobedience to God, from Adam and Eve in the garden, original sin, and our own sins. Sin is disobedience. And Jesus, who was Son of God and man, Son of Mary, saved us by His obedience to the Father. Let me give you an example of a holy saint, Saint Maria Faustina. In her diary called Divine Mercy in My Soul, she gives an incident where she was in the hospital, really a sanatorium for tuberculosis. And the doctor came in and said to her that she was not to go to attend Mass, leave her bed and go to the chapel and attend Mass, but only could receive Holy Communion when the chaplain brought it to her at her bed. Well, this made her very sad because she loved to go to Mass. And at that time when she went to Mass, she saw a vision of the infant Jesus, so she looked forward not only to the Mass, but that vision. And the doctor was saying to give it all up. Her confessor concurred with the doctor and encouraged her to be obedient there. He said that when you are obedient, God will give you many other spiritual blessings, many bless you even more. And though she said she was very sad that she made this act of obedience to the doctor and to her confessor, she said her confessor was, she considered her confessor speaking in Jesus' name. And then when she obeyed her confessor, she obeyed Jesus. After she had made this act of obedience, Jesus came to her, appeared to her, and He said, this is in Divine Mercy in My Soul, paragraph 894. This is the little book of it. I became absorbed in prayer and said my penance. That's after her confession. Then I suddenly saw the Lord, who said to me, my daughter, know that you give me greater glory by a single act of obedience than by long prayers and mortifications. And then she adds, oh, how good it is to live under obedience, to live conscious of the fact that everything I do is pleasing to God. This is the way we are to live. Jesus lived under obedience to the Father's will. He led the way. He saved us by his obedience. And the same way of obedience, the same way of doing the Father's will, not our own, is the way to holiness, is the way of salvation, is the way to great peace and joy in our lives. Lent is a wonderful time if we are doing something outside God's will. If we do need to be more obedient to his will, this is the time to go to him. And here in this case it was in confession that the confessor concurred with the doctor and asked Faustina to be obedient and not go to Mass and stay in her bed and receive Jesus in Holy Communion. If there is anything that blocks us, I have to think of myself too, that where we are not in God's will completely, we're not following the church's teaching in this or that, now is the time to find that great peace. God will give you the graces. It's not impossible to do God's will. The grace is to have the courage to make that good confession, to change those maybe habits that we got ourselves into, our carelessness, our just sort of going along with things. Maybe like Faustina here, making a good confession, and with God's help making a firm purpose of amendment to try really to strive to live only in obedience to the Father's will, in obedience to Jesus shown in his church, his body, through the bishops, our Holy Father, the successors of the apostles, the Pope and our Holy Father, being obedient sons and daughters of the Church, being obedient sons and daughters in the Father's will as he has called us to this vocation or that of marriage, a priesthood, religious life, or single person in the world. Living a life of obedience is living a life of love, a life of peace, a life of joy, a life filled with hope, a life based on the truth. Oh, have a wonderful Lent. Rediscover obedience. Rediscover Jesus, who was obedient to the Father, even to death. And he saved us by his obedience. God bless you now. Have a happy Lent, an obedient Lent. Bye-bye.